Welcome to Mindboost Moments, a podcast for those who want to hear from like-minded people and how they're making a dent in the world. So join me on my continued journey of learning and discovery. In this episode, I speak with Georgie Cooke from Lima Delta. She shares her insights from working across a range of businesses, exploring the delicate balance between fostering line manager autonomy and maintaining consistent organisational standards. Together, Georgie and I discuss the challenges of building essential people skills, the importance of psychological safety, and why listening to people at every level truly matters for successful transformation. This is Mindboost Moments.
Hi, I'm Georgie. I'm one of the co-founders of Lima Delta, which is an agency that makes bespoke digital learning and comms assets to help businesses roll out change and make it stick. And so I spend a lot of my time speaking with, lots of different corporate businesses and understanding the change and transformation that's going on for them, but then critically thinking about how we translate that from being a strategy that senior leadership have come up with to employees and people in all different roles on the ground, knowing what that means for them and how that impacts their culture and what's expected of them and how they perform. I think the best session was one on building line manager skills. It was just quite good because it was a panel with people, with speakers from different businesses, and it was just quite interesting hearing the stuff they all said that was the same and then all the things that were different as well.
Okay. And what they saying the challenges are then if they want to build line manager skills, what are they saying that the challenges are then?
Well, they're kind of saying, think about the balance between giving people managers or line managers like autonomy over how they run their team, how they lead, balancing that with having some central expectations and standards around what that looks like.
Okay.
So like one of the speakers was from the White Company, like fancy linen shops and things like that. And he said for them, it's interesting because a lot of their line managers are store managers. And so they feel like they're running their own business, like that store.
Yeah.
And they want to keep that feeling because that works for them. But then it's trying to say to them, you can run that store how you want, but we do expect the people management to kind of be done in this we expect some things to be consistent across all our people managers, and just like trying to get that balance right.
Why? So what's going through my head now is why. So I get consistency, but why do they want people to manage in a certain way? What's the rationale behind that?
I think because otherwise you get a lot of people who have never line managed before and don't really get the softer skills, people like looking after people side of it. You get people who kind of think that the example he gave was, you would get some people who think that managing the rota and people's shifts is line managing. Okay. But actually there's the whole other part around how are people doing at work, how are they performing, how are they feeling, like that kind of side of it. It's very easy to...
You're right. I've just fallen into the trap of everyone tries to be human around everyone, and that's not the reality, is it? Because if you come from an operational background, you then think, operational, and why is everyone not doing that? And I think the best way to overlay that is by doing lots of rotas and process, and that's not what's going to get the best out of people. But I've just, in my head, automatically, I've just thought, why don't you give managers freedom and flexibility to treat humans, how humans want to behave, and that's different for everyone. But I've just literally just forgot not everyone will connect on a human level like that and go straight to the process piece.
Yeah, I think that's sort of what they're saying.
Interesting.
That some people really default to the process stuff and forget about the connection.
Yeah.
And some people really default to the connection and really let performance stuff slide.
Yeah.
And so it's trying to say to people, it's trying to get that balance right between you be you and lead your way and ask your team what they want and lead for them. But also you can't forget 50% of this.
And here, because Because actually, what you'd want as a line manager is not, I suppose, not training per se in what, what the best way is, or just hints and pointers and, what. So this is what makes a high performing team. Try little bits of it in, with your workforce. And then I suppose if you're one of those store managers or line managers, it's what's really critical. And I keep having this conversation is how do you create a workplace culture that says it's fine if you get things wrong or you don't get them right straight away, or you're not seeing that, reward straight away. It's how do you make people feel safe?
Yeah, that was another one of that. I think that was my second favourite session actually
Okay.
yesterday. Was about psychological safety. And that was quite interesting as well. They were just sort of talking about how they were sort of saying how in a lot of organisations, the term psychological safety is having a bit of a plunge moment
Right.
correlated with everybody's trying to roll back slightly on DEI because
Yeah.
of Trump and everything. But they were just sort of saying how, I'm not articulating this well, like the term psychological safety in itself can, for some people, make them feel a bit defensive. Like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. I'm not making people feel safe. That
Yeah.
sounds like if you're not
Yeah. Yeah.
making people feel safe, you're doing something really, I don't know, aggressive or
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
so they're kind of saying that actually what psychological safety is about is it's just about, exactly as you said, things like people are knowing that they won't be really blamed, or people knowing it's okay to make a mistake and get
Yeah.
feedback, and that feedback isn't bad. Feedback is about
Yeah.
growing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that people feel like they'll be listened to if they bring a new idea or raise something they're worried about. And actually,
Yeah.
when you take it down to what it actually means, it's not that scary and it's not that big of a deal.
No, not, but so that relies on, it's funny because I was only having this conversation yesterday, and it relies on it starting with what the business saying, what do we want to be famous for? Like it, so we've got to be profitable, and we've got a purpose of what we're trying to do, but we want to build a business around people because and God, business has been saying it for so long, but people are the biggest asset, aren't they? And like it costs businesses so much to continuously recruit and lose and recruit and lose. And you lose all of that information. But that's got to start at the leadership level that says, this is what we want to be famous for a business. I'm really struggling personally to understand why it wouldn't include people in the culture and creating an amazing place to be, because that's how you get the best out of people. But it's got to start there, and then everything else falls in place, doesn't it? The line manager to say, what an amazing place to be. I can be myself. I can try things out. But essentially, as long as I'm on a journey to make sure everyone's included and make sure they feel like they found their home, they feel like a place where they can be themselves and perform. Like my job as a line manager is to build that, to enhance the culture that our business is expecting. And how do I do that? Like, it sounds really simple, right? But I know it's not. I know there's so many moving parts in the business, and that's a utopian view. But like, it's got to start somewhere, hasn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with you. I think for me, it feels obvious, and that's always been. But I think you and I are speaking as people who have started businesses like very deliberately with a like culture and people first
Yeah,
mentality, because that feels natural to us and because we know that it leads to better growth as well,
yeah,
better performance. But I think for a lot of huge corporates, they just don't have there's not the same starting point. There's a lot more of that feeling of being a cog in a machine. And I think it
yeah,
is a lot harder to keep a sense of culture and things when it's all about, actually, if you don't smash all these targets, you could be made redundant tomorrow. I think it's
yeah.
really hard for people to feel safe. And
Nice. What trends are you seeing at the minute then in some of your clients?
we've had quite a lot of people recently having new leadership come in, and that new leadership sort of slightly tweaking vision and strategy for the organization, thinking about what's going to make them be still succeeding in 2 years, 5 years, and how that might be different from right now. See, with everything that's going on in the world and in technology. So there's a lot of that kind of slight shifting of direction and vision, and then thinking about how do we translate that down into what we're expecting our people to maybe do differently.
And those businesses, so I think we tend to think of on a similar wavelength, but I tend to think about the people make the difference between just surviving and thriving, and
Mm.
how you leverage that. Is that some of the conversations you're having?
Yes, definitely. I think a lot of the conversations that we have are about you can have a really smart strategy, but without your people, that strategy isn't executed and
Yeah.
therefore doesn't really mean much. So the important thing is how can you get all of the people in your business to understand where you're going, really want to be part of it, be inspired to be part of it, and then, do the day-to-day tasks and activities they need to do to make that happen.
Because again, that if you have we got some metrics, or do you know of any metrics then that say, oh, actually, this disengaged workforce, or the work, the people that are not engaged, what is the cost to the business around that? Because as soon as you start quantifying that, then, most people go, right, so if we tweak this a little bit and we start, treating people like humans, then we get this level of productivity or performance in our business.
Well, I think the statistic isn't exactly what you've said there, but it's along those lines. But there's a really interesting McKinsey report about rolling out change or transformation programs and how many of them are successful and why.
Yeah, yeah. And how many fail? Well, that's what people home in on, isn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly. It's interesting. So I'm just looking at it here. So, 57% of change programs seem successful initially. So it's only 57% that feel successful initially. But
Okay.
then 1 year on, that's down to 44%.
Wow.
And 3 years on, only 12% have sustained that change and transformation. And I think a lot of that is down to how well it's actually integrated into the
Yeah,
culture and
how
how well people
how
really
it's
feel it.
embedded. Yeah, and some of that is the language of. I mean, and we've worked on stuff together that we've used the tagline, "This is just how we do stuff," and and how many businesses don't get to that point to say this is just how we do stuff. Because based on what you're saying, then after 3 years, what typically will happen in an organisation is they'll have another 12 months of going, "We've tried that initiative. Now let's maintain a business to make some profit and to stabilize our finances." Then in another 12 months' time, they'll look at a new initiative, and it's just completely cyclical. And it feels like an initiative rather than we're building an amazing culture in this organization and this is what we stand for.
Yeah. And I think that can definitely happen, especially if each new initiative is almost launched as its own separate thing, rather than
Yeah.
them being strands of one
Yeah.
direction of travel and one, this is who we are, this is how we do things.
And so where's that got to start then? Because, like the bigger your organization is, and so some organizations have got 100,000 people in, some have got 10,000, and it's, I suppose the numbers make it easier, but it starts somewhere, doesn't it? That change, that initiative, that decision to go, this is what we're about as an organization.
Well, it makes me think actually of a project that I've just sort of come to the end of now with an engineering client, which was all about leadership. So they wanted to, their initiative was a new leadership model that they wanted everybody to
Okay.
use, but their approach was really interesting. So I guess the senior team, particularly in HR, had identified things they wanted to improve in terms of how leadership and line management was done across the organization. But they didn't assume they knew all the answers. They went out and did listening groups with very different leadership populations. So from from senior managers, middle managers, first time supervisors,
Yeah.
and people in head office versus people out on rigs, on boats, in very different environments. And they did all these
Yeah.
listening groups. And then only after they had all of that and they'd heard from everybody about what they felt great leadership at this place looked like and where they were struggling and what they wanted, only when they sort of had a picture of that from across the organization did they then come up with, right, this is what we think is going to help everybody.
And was that under the? So I guess the overarching question was, what does great leadership look like to you? And so just asking everybody the same question and getting lots of different sort of narratives around that.
So I think they ask questions about what does great look like, and they also ask questions about what feels hard. about
Yeah.
leading teams so that
Yeah.
they could kind of understand where people were struggling or what they weren't confident with.
And what's stopping? I suppose that's, that's their intellectual property, but I guarantee that their struggles are probably no different from a completely different sector. Actually, it's just they've made an effort to ask all these different people and skills and go, right, we've just been going to be completely open and take the opportunity to listen to everyone. But I'm just thinking, why would they not share that information outside of that sector? Because it's the same.
I think some of it is the same. Like we've worked on several projects on a similar theme, and there's definitely some
Yeah.
leadership behaviors that come up every time. But
Yeah.
I think what maybe felt unique to them was partly the nature of their engineering business and the environments they were operating in. There was definitely some things that were unique about that would be very different versus, say, a retail organization where
Yeah.
they're dealing with stores and distribution centers and things
Yeah.
like that. But I think what was really useful for them about having done that listening group work was partly so that they understood obviously what people really needed and wanted.
Yeah.
But it also meant that then when they were working with us to shape the solution of, right, now we've come up with what we think people need, how do we get that information out to everybody?
Yeah.
They had so much rich information to give us about who these people really are and what they really cared about. And
Yeah.
that meant that what we could create for them was really tailored and
Yeah.
didn't feel generic and wouldn't get that response of, oh, corporate don't understand us.
An initiative that's being pushed at us.
Exactly. It felt
Yeah.
very like,
Yeah.
yeah, we had advocates and people that really were helping shape the solution.
And just out of curiosity then, how long did those listening groups take? How long did they allow to capture all that information?
I don't know an exact answer to that because we came in sort of right at the tail end. They'd sort of
Okay.
done a lot of that work
Yeah. Yeah.
internally. But I think it was over a period of several months that
Yeah.
that they went from,
Yeah.
we think there's something here we need to look at, through
Yeah.
to really understanding the full picture.
And I mean, that's not uncommon. And like what we've found as well is if you want to make the end solution richer, the richest possible experience, and to get it connecting with people, you've got to invest that time up front, being really open to set out what the business is about and then listening to so many people. I remember, well, we were involved in it actually, but I remember years ago when we were doing the onboarding at Compass, before we engaged anyone, we spent about 3 months going around so many different sites and people to ask them what's broken, what would they look for, how could we, tailor it. And I always remember a new director coming in and saying, well, what have you done then? I said, well, we're still listening to people. How long have you been doing that then? And I said, well, it's taken us around sort of 2 months. What the? Get on with it. Like, get it done. It's like, but that is the important part of the project, just to try and make sure that we're tailoring a solution around it. And so for me, it felt really valuable to do that. And so did the end solution. But again, you overlay that with a disconnected corporate agenda and it could all fall flat because people just want to make an impression.
Yeah. And I think when you were leading that project all those years ago, feels like another lifetime now.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, when you were leading that, you understood that not doing that phase or just paying lip service to that phase would probably mean that we still launched with some kind of big bang, but would it have been accepted and adopted by people? Probably
Yeah,
not,
not.
because we wouldn't.
And it would have died quickly as well.
Yeah.
And it would
so
have
then
been another 57% failed project.
Totally. And you would have still invested a lot of time and money in creating that solution, but then it didn't achieve what you wanted it to. So yeah, it's a tough balance, isn't it? If we took a year to get every project done, we would be in trouble. But there are some things that need a bit of time spent up front if you want them to succeed.
Definitely. So I asked you a couple of questions, didn't I, before we joined? And
Yeah.
the one that I want to jump into is what excites you and makes you fizz with energy each day? So what gets you out of bed and goes, yeah, I'm on it?
This is really interesting, actually. I've been thinking about this a lot this year in particular, like trying to get my weeks in general to contain more of the things that make me feel like that.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's about when I know that I'm going to be working towards something and making some progress towards something with other people. that gets me really excited. It's like that sense of forward motion, progress, but doing it with someone else or as a team in a sort of in a connected way really makes me feel really excited. And that could be,
Give me an idea of that then. So give me an example of like, because what does that forward momentum can mean so many different things, can't it?
yeah. So I think, in a work setting, it's the fact that, I'm really lucky to work with a team of amazing creative people. And I love that feeling of when you're in a space together, coming up with an idea
Yeah.
and bouncing off each other. And it's all with there's a particular goal in mind and we're working together on how we get there.
Yeah.
Or it might be I'm working with a client and we're shaping something together. Like those are
Yeah.
sort of work
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
examples. But then also just in life, it's things like one of my favorite things to do on a weekend is to go for a run with a friend and then have a coffee afterwards. And it's that feeling of we just did a thing together.
Yeah. Yeah.
The coffee, I love the coffee as much as the run. But if I
Yeah.
only had the coffee, it's kind of, there's just something extra, I think, that I get from feeling like we just achieved a thing together or we did a thing.
Yeah. And I mean, and I have a balance between things in isolation, but also things with a team as well. So again, I completely get that, just doing something with a bunch of creative people, and like it can be the tiniest thing sometimes, can't it? Like it can be, how are you going to present, an animation, or, it can be as broad as how we're going to crack this whole project, and then just little chinks. And I suppose it's just taking that positivity out of each of those steps. I've had a number of conversations recently, and I'm going to sort of pinch this from Strategic Coach, but I keep saying to people, all you've got to measure is the progress you've made. So the gain that you've made rather than the gap that you haven't filled yet. And there's so many people that focus on, I haven't achieved this yet, I haven't got there yet. And it sends you into a spiral of negativity. Whereas when you reflect on those tiny moments of success, so it might be being on a call with your team and they go, I've just had a brainwave about how we can present that. And you go, oh my God, that's amazing. Why that's why we all work together. And like for that one little thing, how the energy inside you changes compared to those 10 things that you just focus on that make you really negative. It's just like, that's how the mind works a lot of the time. You've got to retrain yourself to go, that little thing's really significant.
Yeah. And I genuinely believe, for me at least, that progress is happiness. Like
Yeah.
I feel happy and content when there is still a gap to close, but I'm progressing.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, sometimes if you set yourself a big goal and then you achieve it, it does feel great,
Yeah.
but then it ends and you're kind of left with this,
Yeah. What now?
now what am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
For me anyway, which might just be my personality type, I immediately need to set another one because for me, I feel my happiest when I'm progressing and closing that gap. So I completely agree. For me, the gap is a good thing. I want to know it's still
It
there.
keeps you motivated.
It's motivating. I'm still
Yeah.
working on
But
it.
you do mentally focus on the gain.
On most days, yeah. There's the odd
Yeah.
day where
Yeah.
all you can
Yeah.
see is how far there is to travel,
Yeah.
especially if it's a goal that feels really pressured for some reason. But most of the time,
But that's also really interesting. So how do you share that anxiety or get rid of that anxiety when you think there's a massive gap here? Like, where does that, because it's all energy, isn't it? Whether it's negative or positive energy, then that needs sharing. So where do you share that? God, I really am trying to live in the game, but I've got this massive gap because it's not healthy to hold that all in.
yeah. I think I guess it depends on the situation, but
Yeah.
I would say I'm not always that great at sharing that anxiety bit. And I find myself trying to just like find ways of processing that energy myself. But I think like practically speaking, I would probably take myself on a run and put myself to bed
Okay.
and I'd feel better
Okay.
the next day.
Okay.
But I think what I'm actually, I guess, kind of like looking for at the moment in my life is people in similar situations to me, particularly maybe people with businesses at a similar stage or who have some of those challenges where you can have that space where you get together and go, oh my God,
Yeah, yeah,
This is the gap. I'm really feeling this gap today, or something like
yeah.
that, because I think I would definitely benefit from sharing that a bit more.
I agree. I think this ought to be the start of it, if I'm honest, because I think that's why we speak
Mm,
occasionally about, and we're quite open with each other. I mean, the irony is we're doing very similar things and we're probably trying to target the same clients as well. But, that doesn't
mm,
stop us being quite open with each other and going, these are the challenges that we're facing, or I've got this in my head. How do I just, talk to someone about it that
mm.
can live it and experience it? First of all, without judging. And sometimes it's just a sounding board, isn't it? But it's about how do we connect as humans rather than forget anything else. I just want a download of, or I want to download sometimes, and I
Yeah.
want to hear someone in a similar situation that goes, "This is what I'm doing. Have you thought about this?"
Yeah. There's something very valuable in that.
I think that's just about, being more open, I think, and like being prepared to listen to the answers sometimes, isn't it? Or listen to the feedback. Because I think it is easy when you're in your own business to go, I need to come up with all the solutions, or I should have the solutions. And like nobody said that. Like that's a mantle that, because I think that sometimes, but that's a mantle I've put around my neck to go, I need to know that. But over the years I'm learning to go, I don't know everything. I don't even know what my role is sometimes. It's just so I'm going to reach out to the people that I think are best to support that.
Yeah. And I do think in general, people assume that leaders at whatever stage, so whether that's your line manager or someone running the business or whatever, I think people assume that leaders have all the answers or like know how things should be done. A lot of my friends who work in completely different roles, completely different sectors, will say to me, just how do you know what you're doing when you're running a business? How do you know what you're doing? And I just have to break it with
Don't
them that I don't.
we just
Well,
figure it out?
or I do, but I do because I've just figured it out, not because I had
Yeah,
this innate knowing,
yeah,
or not because I did some kind of course that told me everything and now I'm just
yeah,
executing it. That's not really how
yeah,
it works. And I think it is quite freeing when you realize that actually almost everyone's in that situation. Whatever your role is, you're figuring it out as you go.
yeah, yeah. I always find that when you speak to people that are in an established organisation, a big corporate organisation, they say, "What do you do?" I say, "Well, what don't I do?" And it sort of, and it doesn't quite compute. You say, "Well, we basically do everything, right?" And that's not just trying to be um, a sort of jack of all trades. It's because that's the reality. And part of it is you sort of enjoy being involved in everything. Whereas in a corporate world, it's like, this is my job, this is my role. And again, I was only having a conversation yesterday. Someone was going, that's not my job, that's your job. And I sort of reflected on that to go, well, you'd never even have that conversation in our businesses because you'd go, right, let's just get it sorted, shall we?
With the we,
Yeah.
like we'll sort
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. We'll
together.
just get it done.
Yeah.
And I think that's a tone of some, client conversations as well, is that it seems to me that the smaller you are as a business, the more agile and that your mind thinks as well. Because I've been on, and you probably have as well, been on multiple client calls where they go, how could that look? And you haven't got the answer, but as long as you say, I've got no idea, but we'll figure it out. And that's the solution. Then it relies on trust to go, well, we trust you that you come up with a fab solution anyway. So it's not a problem that you don't know that. I think the downfall is if you go on those calls, and go, I know exactly how it's going to work. And it's bullshit, isn't it then? And people read through that.
Yeah. And I think, with what we both do, the best solutions are when we own what we're really good at and the client owns what they're really good at, which is understanding their business
Yeah.
and their culture and
Yeah.
their people. And so if you or I marched into a call and said, I know exactly what you need, it would just be like,
Okay.
no, you
Bye then.
don't, because you don't know what it's like. You're not in our organization. How could I know? exactly what will really stick and really resonate with people in an organization. If they're a new client to me, I couldn't. So there is, like you say, there's that trust that you collaborate with the client. They bring that knowledge and expertise. And then, like you say, they trust you to take that and use it as your stimulus to shape something amazing.
And then, and just going back to that, the original question about what makes you fizz with energy is, how do the rest of your team then feel knowing that you get that energy from their creativity? And, you know, does that then inspire them a little bit more?
I think it's something that a lot of the team have in common, actually. Like the
Okay.
kind of times when everyone will voluntarily say, that was a great session or that was a really good day, are often the days where we've done a big brainstorming session together.
Yeah.
There's been like a deadline at the end of that day that everyone is working on together, or not everybody, but a lot of people are working on together and kind of going backwards and forwards and polishing things and just making it that little bit better together. I think we all, to a certain extent, feed off that energy.
Yeah.
But then, of course, for some people, they also really value head down time on their own to really think, and they get a lot of energy from that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where I can't relate, but you know, that's
And that was the point I was also making, that I value that. So I, you know, I enjoy moments of solace really, but I also get a real buzz out of being around, you know, a group of people that are just being creative and coming up with different solutions. But I like to find that balance. So I can relate to that. You know, I'm not one of these that just needs people around me all the time.
yeah. I don't need it around me all the time, but the time I spend on my own with my head down isn't the time that makes me fizz with
Okay.
excitement and
Interesting.
energy. I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
do it, and actually it's often very productive time, but I don't think to myself, yes, I've got 4 hours
On
just
my own.
me and my laptop. Like that doesn't make me feel
No,
excited.
I know what you mean. Yes. Well, I think some people do though, don't
But
they?
yeah,
But yeah,
definitely.
it's
I think
just not, yeah.
some people
Okay.
love just, that flow state you get into when it's that
Yeah.
perfect
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
I think that I do love that flow state as well. But I think for a lot of people, that's what makes them fizz with energy, that time on their own where they can get
Yes.
into that state and
Yeah.
just go.
I suppose it depends on what you're doing, but also, you know, your own experiences and what you see. Like, yeah, whatever gets you into that flow state, really, it just makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And then I ask you another question about, what do you think your superpower is?
This one's
Or what do
hard,
you
isn't it?
what do the people around you think your superpower is, if you ask them?
Well, this is what I ended up thinking about. My question for you is, can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, yeah, we're all good here.
Okay. In that case, I think my superpower might be getting shit done.
So is that what everyone else says? You're just good at getting shit done.
Yeah. I think when people say, yes, I think people say
Okay.
at the time like that. I guess when I say I'm going to do something by a certain day, I do it by then,
Yeah,
and I just get a lot of I guess I get a lot of happiness again from completing things. I'm a
right.
starter finisher. I
Yes.
like to start something, but I
Yeah.
also like to tick it off, have it
Yeah.
done, see the
Yeah.
result. Yeah, so I think that
What is it about that closure then that makes that superpower come out?
it's a good question. I think maybe it comes back to what I was saying earlier about that sense of progress and forward motion. And I always like to have goals and I like to know that I'm progressing towards them. And there's
Yeah.
something about completing the steps along the way that
That
makes me
means
feel
it's
like
done. I've moved.
that's
Yeah.
some kind of line, some kind of
Yeah.
step that feels
Yeah.
like that's done,
Yeah.
that's a step closer. I think that's what it is. So that motivates me to get it to the point where it's finished and I can say, done.
And then what's the immediate step after that? Is that like is there a lull there, or is it straight up onto the next step?
There's probably sometimes a bit of a lull, but I guess in reality, I'm probably climbing several steps of
Yeah.
stairs at once. So there'll be a
Yeah.
lull on one, but I'll be going up the other. But I think this is the other thing I thought was interesting when I was thinking about this question is I think this is my superpower, but I also think it's kind of my biggest weakness at the same time,
I
which
think
is
that's it.
often
I
how
think
these
it's
things
often, yeah.
go. Because I think it's something I have to really watch in myself. And I think I've got better at being aware of this and watching it is I have to be careful that I don't put completion over the journey to get there. my natural tendency would probably be to be a bit too impatient to get something, to be more worried about something being done than something being the absolute best it could be.
That's an internal battle, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. And I guess then the people around you, do they recognize that, and how do they support you on that?
Well, I think it's actually, I guess I see it, given the fact that I'm running this business, I almost see that as my job to manage and make sure that I don't pass that on to other people and make them feel like I don't want my impatience or desire for completion to rub off on other people in a negative way. So I think it's actually more that it's more for me to
self-regulate
that. Yeah.
I think so. That's a challenge, though, to everybody. However aware of yourself you are, there's always that one person that is happy to try and support you to self-regulate, isn't it? So in my life, it's my wife. Amanda will say, "Stop being a dickhead. You're letting that deadline oversee what we're trying to achieve here."
Yeah.
And there's always got to be that external regulation as well, hasn't there, that you've got such a close connection with, that they're the ones that are happy to call it as it is and say stop.
Absolutely. And I think when it's my husband for me as well, and he knows, he will often pick up on the fact that I'm sliding that way before I do.
You're going there, just rein it back in now.
So that is really important, I think, to have the self-awareness mostly, but also to have other people who know you well enough to be able to catch you and nudge you.
And I think that's almost the final piece around great leaders build up that network around them, that the trusted people around them, they know, don't pull any punches and go, yes, stop it now, or do more of that now. But also they've got a real awareness of, like you said, that you're sort of slipping down there and you go, oh, hold on, I need to stop myself a little bit.
Yeah. And you know how they always say, you should try and form teams where people complement each other and fill each other's gaps. I think that was a very deliberate choice when we were trying to kind of form our leadership team at work.
If anyone wants to find out more or connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Just find me on LinkedIn, Georgie Cooke. Send me a message saying you want to be friends.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, Caleb. It's been fun.
This has been Mind Boost Moments. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to hear more, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. And if you want to learn how Mind Boost can really add feeling and emotion to learning experiences within your business, check out our website at mindboostlearning.com.